Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We want to welcome you. We're excited to welcome Khiet Ho Jenkins, class of '07, for creating a life and career when life is unexpected as part of the Brown Global Alumni Career Initiative. I'm super excited for today's session, but my name is Alexia Benros. If you've been joining us so far for several of our sessions, I will introduce myself and my team. I work on the Career and Life Design team as our Career Network Coordinator for the Office of Alumni Relations. I have my wonderful Career and Life Design colleagues joining me today. And the Career and Life Design program in the Brown Office of Alumni Relations is comprised of career and mentoring opportunities to build our Brunonian communities. The three pillars of career and life design include early engagement, experimental engagement, and life after graduation. So we're touching on all of these topics throughout this initiative, and through workshops and one-on-one coaching and innovative resources, we empower alumni to design their lives by building valuable networks and making connections with employers and alumni to alumni, and to stay current with a diverse array of possibilities and fostering a sense of purpose and direction. But today, we're so excited. We'll get to hear from Khiet as she leads this workshop on creating a life and career when life is unexpected. Khiet will be sharing her personal journey of navigating an unexpected life while building a fulfilling career. So through her story, and we'll discover, the resilience and adaptability and how she's defined her own path. We'll discuss creating a roadmap for creating a life and career that thrive amidst the unexpected. Her insights on planning, pivoting, self-awareness, community building offer valuable guidance for anyone looking to navigate life's unpredictabilities with resilience and grace. And a little bit about Khiet. We're so excited to have you leading today's session. Khiet has incorporated social policy and advocacy through her professional and personal life. Khiet earned a bachelor's degree from Brown University in community health and a master's in public health and a master's in social work from UCLA. She is a public health professional and a licensed clinical social worker. Additionally, she is a USMC spouse, mother of 2 children, and a second-generation American. Khiet has worked primarily with military community, providing mental health, counseling, conducting research, managing programs that address resiliency and well-being, and advocating for policy changes. She has also worked with advocating for communities who straddle multiple identities, such as immigrants, young adults, LGBTQIA+ folks. Throughout this work, Khiet understands that one's outcome are interdependent with community support and policies that impact access to resources from the local and organizational level to federal and higher level policy. She has worked in corporate law, lobbying firms, hospitals, county clinics, research organizations, and NGOs. She is currently the lead researcher at the Secure Families Initiative. And throughout her career, she has supported her Marine spouse through multiple combat and non-combat deployments while balancing a career, raising 2 young children, and moving all around the globe, which we'll hear about today. Since college, she has lived in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Eastern North Carolina, Arizona, South Carolina, Japan, Virginia, and currently, as she mentioned, South Korea. So, Khiet, I'm going to turn things over to you because I am so excited for you to run this session and be able to get the most out of it for myself. So totally geeking out. So please take it away.
Thank you, Alexia. That was a wonderful introduction. So thank you for having all that information. But thank you everybody for coming to this chat today. And so Alexia already did her great introduction, and what I wanted us to be able to talk about was in this presentation, what I wanted to talk about was how to craft a life and career for yourself when you might not have the most control over your own career advancement choices, whether it's because you are balancing your own life and your choices with your partner's life and their choices. And that might also include geographic location. It might include that there are new challenges that come up that forces a pivot from your planned path. It might be changes in life priorities. Lots of things might come up and lots of things might be a challenge to you just following your dreams. It could be financial constraints, responsibilities with caregiving for children or parents or other loved ones. There's lots and lots of things that come up that make life unexpected. And I think particularly for us who have been in community with other Brown students, I think there's a large portion of us who also feel like we should be doing these incredible things. We've had all these really big dreams and ambitions, and sometimes it's a lot harder to accomplish those goals that we've set out to achieve than we imagined. And I will tell you about my life and where I am. And as I was crafting this presentation, this conversation, I was trying to decide how much of it should be a conversation, how much of it should be about tips and guidance and things that I've picked up along the way as I've navigated through all these different geographic locations, while also trying to figure out a career path, or should it be about holding space for this topic that can feel really vulnerable for a lot of us, because I think all of us have wanted big dreams and sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And so, and oftentimes we might not have a space to really talk about that and to really dig a bit deeper about the ability to pivot or change or reprioritize and to find happiness that is outside of um, a career trajectory that receives a lot of press. So, and I think in this community, as supportive and wonderful as our peers might be, I think it is also really easy to feel like we're not good enough or that we're behind, or sometimes even feel like we're a failure or you'll never make it and can't compete with your peers, regardless of what you've already done or want to do or what other circumstances are pressing in on you. I think a lot of us, if we're looking back and taking an assessment about what we've done, I think a lot of us can say that we've actually been doing quite well and we've done a lot of things, but it's still easy to fall under this trap that we're not doing good enough. And we want to keep contributing to something and at the same time wanting to create a well-balanced life. And so we're all trying to figure that out, what that looks like professionally and personally. And so I hope this talk today can be a place to have these vulnerable conversations and to also leave here feeling a bit more empowered on how to navigate this life and its complications. And so I'd like to start real quick and get a quick idea about who's here today and about where you are in your career stage. How would you describe where you are? I'm not sure if we're going to do this in the chat as just a conversation piece or as a poll, but Alexia is going to launch something. And the question is, how would you describe where you are in your career right now? Are you a brand new graduate? So you're at the beginning stages of building your career? Are you somewhere past entry level, somewhere in the middle? You're solidifying what you want to be when you grow up? Have you made progress, but you're still feeling lost? Are you pivoting? Are you somewhere else along this life stage? How would you describe it? And after this poll, if you want to enter it into the chat, feel free to do so if you want to add any sort of clarification. Thank you for launching that, Alexia.
Awesome. I always love to see the poll because just when I think it's going one way, it's another. We have some folks who are still in undergrad, some folks who are 5 years or less out, 10 years or less out of school. So it's third, there goes the percentages changing on me. More than 10 years out of school, got 42% joining us for more than 10 years out of school, 33%, 10 years or less, 17% for 5 years or less out of school.
I see somebody in the chat that they're also a military spouse. I feel so much less alone right now because I've yet to encounter a military spouse who's also a Brown alum. So this is great.
I'm gonna close out this poll. Thanks everyone for participating. 100% answered. We have a very engaged audience today. Love that.
And then my next question is, what are you hoping to get out of today's talk? Is there a topic that you were hoping that we would cover? Did you come in with a specific question? And if you had something specific, then I can try my best to address it. I'll let people enter in anything if it comes up, but if we can go on to the next slide, please. This is the slide that I was going to do my introduction, but Alexia has already done such a good job, so I'll try to keep it nice and brief. But I wanted to talk about how I went from Brown to where I am now, which is that I'm mainly a stay-at-home mom, but I'm also working part-time. And I want to talk about how there is this Instagram version of us or a LinkedIn version of us. And Alexia's done a really good job of presenting me in this very LinkedIn professional, accomplished way. And then there's also this reality portion of our lives where there are the details that might not be highlighted, but really impact how we've been able to craft a life and a career for ourselves. And then there's also this other smaller portion about reality of, and I put it in quotes, which is this reality that we are interpreting inside our head of the life that we are living. And sometimes the reality or that interpretation that we have in our head isn't necessarily helpful and isn't necessarily accurate to our actual lived experience that honors what we've done, what we want to do, the challenges, the real circumstances, all the different competing factors that we're having to juggle. So yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry, this is an older version of that's okay. That's fine. So this one is my career pathway is a way to talk about my sort of like Instagram, LinkedIn version of myself. And Alexia's already talked a lot about it, which is that, I graduated from Brown. I had some work experience. I eventually went to graduate school to get a master's in public health and master's in social work. And I was hoping that that would set me up for career success while also figuring out my personal life. And from my social work degree, I prioritized getting a license, knowing that once I got licensed as a clinical social worker, it would open more doors for me professionally, even though I knew while I was moving around as part of my personal life factors. And from there, I was able to do some program management work, additional clinical work, and have always incorporated advocacy at multiple levels, either within the agencies or within sort of like a volunteer experience. And now I've landed in a position now where I have this title of lead researcher, which sounds really fancy, but at the same time, really, I am a stay-at-home parent and I work part-time, even though I have this title, and I landed this position surprisingly so, because I initially was rejected from the position. Then a few months later, the organization had asked if I was interested in a different position. And in that conversation, I said, I would love to, but we might be moving overseas and I'm not sure. And then eventually doing little bits of volunteer work. I am here now and I have this particular title, but I'm still very much working part-time. And my regular day is very much, I'm taking care of 2 children, shuttling them around. So, and then so then my reality, right? So the first one is sort of my Instagram, LinkedIn version. The next one is my reality is that I am married to my high school sweetheart who also has always wanted to join the military. And we got married when we were pretty young. We got married in 2008, which was a year out of graduating from college. So we were 22 years old. And at the same time, I knew that I wanted to do something with my life. And I knew that with him being in the military, I need to set myself up for success. So in total, we did 10 years of long distance where we grew up in Colorado. I went to Brown, then I worked in DC for a few years, and then I went to graduate school in Los Angeles. And then my husband, who was still my boyfriend at that time, went to college in Arizona, and then commissioned into the military, went to Virginia, Florida, Mississippi, Washington State, when I was out in Los Angeles, then moved to North Carolina. And then when I graduated from graduate school in 2013, I joined him and officially started living my military spouse life. And we've been in North Carolina. We were in Arizona for a little under 2 years. We're in South Carolina for about a year. We were in Japan for 3 years. We were in Virginia for 1 year. We've been in South Korea for 1 year, and we have about one more year here. And I don't know where we're going to go next. So the reality is that my career trajectory has had a lot of periods of pauses and has had a lot of interruptions where I have had a job that I thought I landed was part of my dream job. And then I had to quit because we were going to move to another state across the country. And I didn't know how long I was going to be there. And at the same time, we were doing family planning. So when we were in Arizona in 2016, we had our first child. And then we moved to South Carolina. And in 2018, we had our second child. And so because of all the short stops, it was really difficult to figure out how to decide on work, right? If you know that you are only going to be in a location for a short period of time, then there's a lot of work involved to figure out the network, figure out the area, figure out what job positions are available, do the application process, interview, get hired, start the process. And you might be there for a few months, and then eventually, for me as a military spouse, have to really consider what it's like to then say, sorry, I don't know if I can continue this, or is it possible for me to continue this position while moving to another location. And so while balancing family planning decisions and knowing our temporary locations, I've had to take pauses in my career throughout this time period. The other reality with my life is that I've also had to do a lot of solo parenting because my husband's in the military. He's had a lot of deployments. He's had a lot of away from home work. And so, for instance, when we were in Japan, we were there from 2019 until 2022, which means that COVID started while we were living in Japan. I had a less than 1 year old, and I had and then a 2 year old at that time. And my husband was away for a lot of it. And it was really hard to work. It was really hard to figure out how do I work, or at least how do I work full time? And so during that time period, I was able to continue doing clinical work, and I was taking care of the children during the day. And then I put the kids to sleep. And then I started doing mental health services around 7:30 or 8 at night, and then saw clients until about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, finished up work, cleaned the house, went to bed, and started up again. And then about 6 months before we moved, I decided that I needed to take a break from work. And then when we went to Virginia for a year, I wasn't working then initially either, because working in between raising kids full time during a pandemic took a lot out of my own mental health, and I just needed a break from things. But when I arrived in Virginia, there was a particular job position that came across my email, and I decided to see if I should apply. Well, I applied to it to just kind of see where it would go. And I made it pretty far through the interview process, and it was only going to be a 6-month stint anyway, so I thought it would work out really well. I ended up getting rejected from that position. But that rejection has led me to where I am now, which is this other part-time position where I have this title that sounds much fancier than it is. And at the same time, I'm doing really cool stuff with it, even as a part-time capacity as lead researcher of this military advocacy organization called Secure Families Initiative. Okay. And so I provide all this context, and the context explains a bit as to why I'm able to give this presentation. And I know the military context is very specific, but some of these challenges are still generalizable for other industries or other challenges that you might face. I know there are fields like academia or professional sports or aid work or other sorts of fields of work where you have somebody who has a much more fixed job or less flexible job, and somebody else has a much more flexible career that is able to move around a little bit more. you might face some of these circumstances because maybe both people have really demanding careers, but as a partnership, you're deciding to compromise and prioritize one person's job over another for now, for whatever the reasons might be. Or maybe one person's career is more flexible than another, so it makes sense to follow the less flexible job. You're choosing to prioritize the job that pays more. I think that's a real reality, right? It happens, and that's life. And there's no shame in trying to have it all, or prioritizing a relationship, or being pragmatic, or trying to be flexible. And so these are all real challenges, and we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to balance all of these differing things in our lives, and it's uncomfortable to talk about. And I'm hoping that we can talk more about that with this conversation today. So I'll take a pause here. And if you're comfortable sharing, whether privately to any one of us or in the larger group, I'd love to know what industry or field or reality you face that makes this conversation relevant to you, or if there's some reality where it's impacted your own career advancement. I'd love to see how we're intersecting here. I'll let that float in while I move on to the slide that we are on, which is that now that we've talked about context, I'd like for us to shift and talk about some tips and some guidance that I've acquired along the way that I'm hoping to pass on that could be helpful for you. So there's this balancing act that we've all experienced, which is trying to balance our career ambitions while also balancing reality. And part of that is also taking care of ourselves and building community at the same time. And the thing that I've learned the most is that things change and people matter. Good things change, right? Your dream job changes, your dream community changes, your children's ages and stages change, the demands of your partner's work life changes, the good things and the bad things change. Your community that feels like it's so lacking, that can change. You might move, so that changes. And people matter. The people that you are in relationship with, right? The person that you choose to love, the people that you surround yourself with who can love you, that you choose to love in return, but also just different types of relationships, whether they are acquaintances or people you pass by, or people who can be your mentor, or people you can mentor and have a mentee relationship with. If it's somebody who's more experienced in the world or the community that you're in, if it's somebody that you might not necessarily connect with, all these people matter, and they don't have to matter all in the same way, but they are part of your community and a part of your life, and they can have an impact on you. And so what I want to also remind everybody is that even if there are people that you don't necessarily want to be in community with, but you have this type of life, then I would just advise you to try not to burn bridges. I don't know what Becky's experience has been in the military, but for me, it's been really hard to find connection and find a really good community in military life, because I found that the values that I hold have been different than what the majority culture has been. And sometimes it feels really unsafe for me. And sometimes there is a temptation to burn certain bridges for particular reasons, but at least in the military community, it's really, really small. So it's really important to not burn those bridges. And even if that is not somebody that you can grow a lot from or have any positive relationship with, I do think that there's a way that you can incorporate that experience to help you grow individually as a person, to have some practice in navigating challenging relationships, or have practice in holding strong boundaries and understanding what your needs are. I'm going to take a moment real quick to scan the chat. Yeah, military life and raising kids while trying to build a career has been very, very difficult. Yeah, health, right? Health issues requires so much capacity to address. When we were in Arizona and we had our first child, I was working full-time initially, And I thought at that point that was the dream job that I landed as part of my career trajectory. And then we had our first child, and I was coming back from maternity leave. And at the same time, we were dealing with some health issues from my son. And it was just impossible to go back to work full time. Not only impossible to go back full time and working at the same capacity and same level, but also to just make it to all these appointments or schedule all these appointments or find the providers. And we were living in a really small town in Arizona, so we were traveling a couple hours to one city and a couple hours to another city, trying to piece together different medical appointments to address these health concerns. And yeah, your health has a huge impact in your ability to work, to be healthy, to engage with people. So I feel you and thank you for sharing that. Um, and so there are lots of us who might have moved around the world for various reasons. Um, yeah, there are lots of things that are going on. Raising kids is a huge component, trying to figure all that out, being a full-time parent. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay. Um, when we are building our life, when I have been working on building my own life, I've thought about my career self. I've learned how much myself matters, and I've learned that community can be tough to build, but is also a huge component in our lived experience. And so, if I want to start first by talking about the career component, which is that if you have the ability to plan out your career, then what I found is that being strategic in your choices can benefit you, obviously so. And so for me, the fact that I knew that my husband was going to have a military career, I knew that I needed something that was a bit more flexible. When I graduated from college, I originally thought that I wanted to go into health policy. So my first job was at a corporate law firm. I was working with its lobbying arm as well. And I was getting exposure on attorneys and law stuff and policy and politics stuff. And I realized that there was no way that I could have that career and be a military spouse at the same time. Because so much of that work and to do it really well is to build a network and usually to have a network that you're building on one singular location where you're becoming a subject matter expert on that particular thing. And there was no way for me to do that and to bounce around the world. And so I had to take a shift. I had to make a pivot. I had to reassess what I could do, what I wanted to do. And so I had to think a bit more creatively on what my life goals were and if I still wanted to have a career in policy and what that could look like. And so trying to balance out this requirement or this challenge of having to be a bit more mobile, but then also wanting to do policy work. And then also taking a step back and realizing that I was in my 20s at the time. And we're working until we're in our 60s or maybe even 70s, maybe later. And that's several decades, right? 40 years worth of work. And so within that time frame, there is opportunity and there's room for me to see my career in chunks and shorter term goals, middle term goals, and longer term goals. And maybe I could then have a strategy where I'm accomplishing little chunks at a time and still have a vision for the direction that I'm going, but also allowing enough space that if I have to veer off course a little bit, if I have to make some turns, that if I'm still working there towards this particular goal, then all these other experiences on the side, I can still figure out if I can acquire skills or acquire experiences that will still benefit me. So I realized that if I could become a licensed clinical social worker, then I could do direct mental health care and I could be a bit more mobile and and hireable when we're moving around all the time. And I figured from there, I could build my experience and maybe gain a bit more of a supervisory role, a management role, and then have more impact on developing programs and having more oversight for things and having a little bit more influence over being able to improve people's lives. And even if I wasn't right at the policy level yet, that all of these experiences could then eventually feed into my ability to work towards policy change, 10, 20, 30 years later. And so I was hoping to open up my aperture a bit on what I could do to accomplish my goals of leading a meaningful life. At some point in time, like I'm not working in the field of health policy, and I'm working in the world of military advocacy and some military policy related stuff now, but there's still things that I care a lot about. So I've given myself room to shift the focus a bit. And who knows, maybe one day I'll end up in health policy, or maybe I'll never end up there because I've found a different direction that works better for my life. And when you have this unpredictable life, then you might also have to pivot, right? Where the thing that you originally planned isn't the thing that's working out for you for whatever the reason might be. And so the things that have helped me the most is giving myself permission to change, giving myself permission to take a break, giving myself permission to say yes to things that might be different than what I expected, but also giving myself permission to say no to things that don't work out for me anymore, and also allowing for imperfection. Maybe the job that's in front of me isn't exactly what I want, but maybe it checks enough boxes and maybe there's something that's valuable that I can still get out of it. And so maybe it's worth it, and maybe I try it out, and maybe it's not worth it. And I can give myself permission to say, you know what, that didn't work out for me. I gained this from this. I didn't like this part, and I can pivot and try something else again. And the other part of career planning is also with family planning too. And that had a huge impact on my career trajectory. Um, Regardless of your gender and regardless of how you choose to expand your family, if you choose to expand your family, it has an impact on your career. But at the same time, there are a lot of data that show that if you are the woman or the person who's pregnant and giving birth, that it has an impact, a much larger impact on your career trajectory because of how it changes things for you. Especially if you have health things that you need to recover from, or mental health things that you need to recover from. And also if you're figuring out all the feeding stuff, breastfeeding or formula feeding or mixed feeding, and you're figuring out the scheduling for it and the accommodations for it, like there are all these things that you have to juggle. And sometimes it's a lot. And the right thing for you to do is to say, I need to focus on my family right now. I need to take a pause on my career. And it's scary, especially when you are comparing yourself to your peers and comparing yourself to this idea that you had of yourself, of where you should have been or what you should be doing. The thing that I've held onto the most, and this was some words that I received from my supervisor at the time, is that your competence doesn't change. Even when you take a pause, even when you take a break, even if you feel as though you are not making progress, your competency doesn't change just because you have children and just because you have to stop some of your career progression right then. Your ability to analyze things, to consume information, to synthesize stuff, to connect with people, to work on numbers, like all of these things, all of these skills that you have, all of these skills that you've developed up to that point, they still remain, even if they go in hibernation for a little while, and even if they're a little rusty and you have to work on bringing them back up again. But your competency still exists, and that's something I've held on to. Another part of family planning that I've felt more reassured about too is that in this year of 2024, I think there is more of us who are talking about the challenges of family planning and career planning. And there's much more acknowledgement and acceptance that it's too hard. It's a lot to juggle all these things at the same time. And so a lot of us have taken pauses and are finding ways to re-enter the workforce. And we're also finding solutions for ourselves. And we're also finding ways to value each other in handling and holding these different struggles and challenges that we're all dealing with at the same time. And while you're navigating your career, and if you're moving around to a lot of places, and if you're pivoting, and if you are finding yourself shifting from what you had originally envisioned for yourself to a different reality that exists, having an understanding of yourself matters so much in navigating this world in a much smoother way. Maybe it's my own bias because of my mental health care background, but I will always encourage people to seek therapy because that is a dedicated space for you to have support and to work through some of the challenges and to figure out trends and to just figure out who you are as a person and where you can lean in, where you can push yourself, and also what your needs are, what your boundaries are, what your limits are. And then you can make these little tweaks in areas that you do have some control over, people that you want to connect with, people you don't want to connect with, adventures or activities or experiences that are new or different or more that would enrich you. All these things that you know about yourself that you can choose to honor yourself is going to help you with this process. And it's really easy to beat yourself up. And so if you can show kindness and grace to yourself, if you can suspend judgment of yourself, that because things are going one way or another way, that it doesn't have to be an indictment of who you are as a person. It doesn't have to be an indictment of your entire life, that it could be a temporary thing that you're going through that is challenging, but that doesn't negate the totality of who you are. And so the more knowledge that you have of yourself, the more power you have in making decisions that are more fulfilling, that are more enriching for yourself. And then building community, I think, is a challenge regardless of how well you're doing in your career path. This is a conversation that has come up over and over and over again when I've talked to my friends about this, regardless of how fancy the resume looks or not fancy the resume looks. Because I think the world is what it is right now. And I think there is, like, if you've had a really positive experience at Brown, I think it's a struggle when you're experiencing an adult life that doesn't have that immediate type of buzz or connection or fulfilling sense of community. And then there's just, everybody has their own stuff that they're dealing with. And so the things that I've learned with trying to build community is one tip is to give yourself permission. And I've said this earlier too, but giving yourself permission to say yes and giving yourself permission to say no, giving yourself permission to try new things that you think is so different than what you would have normally done. But just giving yourself permission to make whatever decision that you think is best in that moment, given the circumstances that are in front of you. Suspending judgment on yourself. So similar to what I talked about before in developing your sense of self or building up your own sense of self-worth, is that what's helpful is also suspending judgment of the people who are in your community. This is particularly something I've had to develop for myself, being a military spouse and feeling like there's a lot of disconnection in that I've had to suspend my immediate judgment of people and trying to still build connection and leaving room for us to connect in ways that are different than what I would have originally wanted or expected, but still hoping that there's something that we can support each other in. And then imperfection is okay. You might not find the perfect friend. You might not find your best friend right away. That community that you are joining or that you're participating in or that activity that you're participating in, that yoga class that's just what you really wanted to do but is imperfect, all these things, imperfect is okay. And it's a start. And sometimes the imperfection can lead to something else. Another part of community building that I found really helpful too is that thinking and holding on to this idea that starting with one is totally fine. Maybe you only have that one friend that you found, or maybe there's that one person that you haven't built a friendship with yet, but piques your curiosity a bit and you've had a little bit of connection with. And you can start off with that one person, or maybe it's that one activity or that one coffee shop. And maybe you start there as a reference point, as a home base, as a place of comfort to then expand out your community. And the thing is that things change all the time. So whatever challenge you're facing, it doesn't last forever. I didn't touch so much about the people part on this, but what I did want to mention is that throughout the career portion, throughout building yourself, throughout building community, too, is that there are opportunities for you to just learn from the people around you. One of the things that I've gotten a lot out of with the resources from being at Brown was just learning how to do informational interviews. So being able to reach out and say, I'm really curious about you. Can I learn more about what it is that you've gone through, your field of work, how you took a break from your career track, any of those things, and just learning more about another person. And that person might not be somebody who can directly fix your situation right then and there, but perhaps there's something about that connection that impacts you in a positive way sometime later down the line. And the people that you're choosing to build community with, and the people that you're surrounding yourself with who can cheerlead you or help you identify what your strengths are, or can really highlight for you what you bring to the table, especially when you're really beating yourself up. All these people that are a part of your life, whether they are locally there for you or people you stay in connection with but live across the world, or they're new people that you're trying to connect with. People matter. And that doesn't mean that you have to accumulate a lot of people, but choosing people who care about you and choosing to care about other people can matter and have a huge impact on your ability to live a life and craft a life, especially when there are all these challenges and unpredictabilities that occur. And if nothing else, I'm hoping that by talking about all these things, that you're not alone in experiencing challenges and trying to balance out all of these life and career and personal things that we're trying to do. I'm going to take a pause real quick and scan the chat. Yeah. Healthy sleep schedule can have a huge impact in your ability to just navigate life in general, to have healthy relationship with yourself, as well as healthy relationship with other people in your life in order to show up. And yeah, it's a huge challenge. Yeah, that is true. I see Gladys here is talking about how human resources and organizations don't often seem to understand that there are skills that aren't lost when you've taken a break from your career. Yeah, yeah, that's a challenge. And at the same time, I think there are increasing number of us. Maybe there's not a majority of us yet, but I think there is an increasing number of us. And I think there are more ways that we're learning how to communicate with one another so that we can share how are we marketing ourselves so that we can say that we have done these things and we're still able to do these things. And I am a valuable asset to this job that I'm applying for. Yeah, the um, the decision to use a skills resume rather than a chronological one. This is a particular thing that I think a lot of military spouses or anybody else who've had a lot of starts and stops in their careers have had to figure out is how do you sell yourself and how do you explain all of these empty spots in your career? And there are all these tips out there about, volunteering or taking on other jobs or highlighting yourself in different ways. And I think we do the best that we can. And we only have so much control over the hiring process or the job process, but we do the best that we can. Yeah. Immigration privileges is a huge thing. Yeah. I'm so glad that there's chat and that there are people participating in the chat and sharing with one another the different experiences that you've had with the challenges and the successes. I want to talk a little bit more about immigration, but I don't know how to talk about it gracefully right now. And so I'm sorry that I won't be able to bring to talk about it more expansively, but there are certain privileges that, depending on who you are and where you are, and there are other challenges that we might have. I'm sorry, I'm standing up real quick. There was another comment. Okay. That I just wanted to make sure that I noted. Okay. And I think the last slide is just my takeaway. So if we can go to that one. And I'm hoping through this conversation that I've communicated enough that things change and everything is temporary, whether they are good things or challenging things. And whether that is a good thing that gives you some hope, or whether that is something that is a reality that that you just keep in mind, a reminder that people matter in big and small ways, and that you are more than a singular moment, and you are more than a singular phase in your life. And there are so many more aspects to life than the job that you're holding right then, or the not job that you don't have right then. Imperfection is okay. And I hope that at the end of this conversation that you feel that, that you have the ability to navigate this world a little bit more. And at the very least, that you're not alone in the struggles of building a career and finding a balance of your life, your personal life, love, family, community, all of that. So I will end the talk there. If there are any additional questions or anything else that people want to share, I would love to continue, or we can say bye when the time is right.
Yeah, thank you so much for this impactful session. I know that it has been really impactful for me, and I think we talk a lot about storytelling as an extremely powerful tool. And I think that this group, as well as my team, we thank you so much for sharing your story. We have a couple questions. If we have a little bit of time, we have a question that says, for you, Kit, that says, you talk about how rejection helped you to land better opportunities. How do you help yourself trust that things need to fall apart for other things to come together?
Practice makes perfect. Sorry. I think I think that's just it. Practice makes perfect. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with my own internal work and trying to figure out how to make the best of the circumstances. Yeah, I've been rejected and I've had to walk away from a lot of opportunities. And there are other times when I have created small opportunities or have leaned into an interest that eventually led to something. Um, my example of that is that I've had to walk away from various jobs or to not look for or apply for jobs that have come my way because I really had to balance, how do I raise my children while solo parenting, and living in communities that are very temporary for me, and wanting to support my kids in this really mobile and unstable life that we live. And so, and at the same time, one of my interests or the things that I've cared a lot about has been just democracy and voting. And there was a time period when we were living in Japan where I'm trying to remember if I was working. I was working part-time then, but I wasn't working in the field of advocacy or policy work. But I knew that there was a need in that particular community and that there wasn't a voter registration drive. There were a lot of people who didn't know about how to vote as a military voter. And so I organized a small voter registration drive at that particular base. And that required me of figuring out what resources were available, what I could put out on a table, and creating a schedule and recruiting some volunteers. And we did it for, I think, 4 weeks. And I had maybe I don't know, a dozen volunteers or so over the course of these shifts. And so it was a small thing that I did for a few days over the course of a month. And that turned out to be a talking point that I could use for this position with Secure Families Initiative, or just landing a position with Secure Families Initiative, who I'm working with now. It was also my work from, back when I had just graduated from college, working at the lobbying firm. And even though I hadn't done policy or political work from basically 2008, 2009 until now, I was still able to talk about what I gained from that experience, or the insight I had from that, and being able to piece together the things that I was still interested in or passionate about. And then also utilizing this particular experience or opportunity that I made for myself, even though in my head, or the reality that I talked to myself about, was that, oh, it was just a small thing. It wasn't this large campaign. But I was able to piece these two experiences together to market myself and say, you know what, I do have this experience, and I have these other perspectives and these other experiences that make me a really good candidate for what this organization is looking for. And so even though I got rejected for it, I think I made a good enough impression and I made sure to let the interviewers know that I really, that I really admired the organization, and that if there were opportunities in the future and stuff, and miraculously they remembered me. And I would also say that with this organization too, I think it's easy to look at an organization that you're applying for and also think or identify the different ways that it's imperfect. But I think there's also ways to look at it and wonder, is this a place that I can see myself working at, even if it's temporarily, or maybe it's something that's long term that you can see yourself in, and giving yourself that permission to leap in and see where it can take you. And so this organization is a startup nonprofit, and it was a small group of people who really wanted to do big things. And we have been slowly growing and have been making some bigger waves. And I'm really proud of the work that the organization has been able to do, that I've been able to contribute in. But I would just say that, yeah, I've had a lot of no's, and I've had a lot of things that haven't worked out. But I'm trying to keep in mind that my life story isn't about this particular rejection or this particular moment where that opportunity didn't work out. And is there something else I can do right now that would be good for me, whether that is to prioritize my own mental health, to lean into an activity that brings me joy, to build community or connection with something that doesn't have anything to do with my career path, or to build a skill or take a class or whatever else. And maybe in some years down the road, that will still be something that is part of my larger narrative of who I am, and maybe I can pull from it. So suspending judgment, giving yourself permission to say yes, giving yourself permission to say no, and just, yeah, letting yourself experience life and accept that you are doing the best that you can based on the challenges and what you have in front of you.
Thank you so much, Kit. I actually have one more question, if we can squeeze in the last few
Yeah,
minutes. Just because you are such a stellar mentor to our military affiliated students and to many others in the Brunonian community. So how do you use your story to mentor others? I think that, sometimes mentorship can be like this big, scary word. But you've been so impactful over our community. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
sure. I would say, well, I was a mentee through the Women's Launch Project at Brown, and that was pivotal for me to figure out how to navigate my career path at the very beginning, because I'm a first generation college student. My parents were immigrants. They had not, done any sort of schooling in the United States. So I didn't understand how to apply for jobs, what came after college. And the thing about that mentorship relationship was that I valued being listened to, and I valued having somebody cheer me on, and I valued somebody providing insight from their experiences that they've had over the years that I knew I didn't have any experience with yet. And so they were able to open my aperture a little bit and were able to provide reassurance that things can happen for you. And if you keep moving along and trying to do the best with what you have in front of you, that something will work out. And I participated in other mentorship programs as a mentor through Brown because I have felt like my story might not be applicable to everybody, but I think the programs, the mentorship programs at Brown have been really good at matching the right people together. And so even if I might not be going to medical school, but my mentee is looking for that pathway, I'm able to at least provide insight on how you figure out the things that you want for your life. And some of it is just about providing space and providing another opportunity for somebody to share their concerns and share their hopes and dreams with, and being able to validate that experience and say, you know what, I believe in you, and I'm trying to figure things out myself, and the world is challenging, but we don't have to do this alone.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kit. And thanks for such a awesome session. Thank you to everyone for engaging so much in the chat. You really created a space today where folks felt like they could show up and be vulnerable and share. And your story really resonated with so many. Thank you so much for this great presentation, Kit. We so appreciate you and, being able to feature you as part of our global alumni community in this way has been so great for us.
Thank you for putting these conversations together.